Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and have you ever been sitting on your sofa stroking your dog reading a book and then contemplated maybe that you're not using your ceiling as well as you could be? I was recently contemplating how perhaps the ceiling could be optimized and used in another way, because generally it's pretty much wasted space. Now, I've just recently got my hands on a device that we could maybe use to make the ceiling a bit more interesting and a bit more user-friendly if you want to nerd out on things. My room is stocked full of nonsense thanks to my wife, but the ceiling is mostly untouched, making it wide open for a perfect use for this new device that I'm testing, which is the Nebula Mars 3 Air. Now, this is a portable projector, which has my dog mesmerized, as you can see, and rightly so, because it's a small projector that's capable of projecting images for up to 2.5 hours, and it's built with Google TV, meaning you can access the usual things such as YouTube, Netflix, Prime Video and more, assuming that you have access to those things. It's up to 1080p projection over a 150-inch screen potentially, depending on the size of your room and the space that you're then projecting onto. You also have HDMI connections, meaning that you can plug in other external devices. So I'm going to be using it with a gaming PC in a minute. Now you can also plug it in with a wire, and then if you've got a suitable tripod, you can mount it on there, project on the wall, or alternatively do what I'm doing and project it straight up onto the ceiling. This then means that you can lay back on the floor and enjoy some nice prawn content, watching my videos on the ceiling. And assuming you've got a white ceiling, which probably most people do have, and that it's smooth, you should get a nice projection up there with a pretty good display. Now, this has up to 400 lumens of brightness, which means it's pretty good even during the day. So this footage here was captured with the curtains open so that you can still see what's going on. Now, I won't say it's perfect in that way, because the brighter the room is, obviously it's going to negatively impact it in some way. So it does definitely perform better in a darker room. But if you have a suitable tripod, then you can put it in this position and then obviously shine it up onto the ceiling. You can't get up to 150 inches there, at least I couldn't, but what you could do is you can game at 1080p. So I plugged it into a gaming PC, and then I put on my Udi and relaxed on the floor for a little while just to get some finals gameplay in. Now, I will say that the finals isn't that amazing when you're using a controller, so I would recommend using a keyboard and mouse instead, but that's a different story. And there's George the cat having a look to see what I'm up to. Now, this projector actually packs a surprising punch in a number of ways, because not only is it able to do that massive screen at 1080p, but it also has two 8-watt Dolby audio speakers packed inside it, and I was really surprised by how loud those things get as well. So it's actually pretty capable in a number of different ways. So obviously I'm using it for gaming now, and you've already seen some YouTube content. You can potentially watch films and other things via Netflix on there too. Yes, it's at 1080p, and obviously you're not going to get like super fast refresh rates for PC gaming on this thing, so it's not going to be a gaming monitor. But obviously if you've only got a small space and you haven't got space for a large monitor on your desk, for example, the ability to then broadcast and project onto a wall or onto the ceiling means that you can potentially have a much bigger play space to play around with, which is pretty neat. Also, you can move it around really easily because it's portable, and as long as you have a suitable solid surface to stand it on, or a tripod ideally, you can then move it around into a relevant place and adjust it. Now, there are some settings that you can also tweak within the software of the projector itself, so you can actually resize the projection and re-angle it, and when you need to, you can move it into another room and do something a little bit more sensible, like lying on your bed gaming. So here I'm taking over my son's room just to demonstrate what's going on here, and you can then shine it up onto the ceiling there. Now, the good thing about his room is it has blackout curtains in it, so you could see that if you close those curtains and it's a lot darker, you'll see that the display is actually pretty impressive. Now, I can't really do it justice on the camera, I don't think, so it is worth mentioning that it is going to vary depending on how much light there is in the room, and obviously what the surface you're projecting onto is like. My experience is during the day it looks a bit fuzzy. Also, the bigger you make it, the worse it looks. And that's kind of logical because it's only a 1080p display. So if you make it the full 150 inches, then it will suffer. But as you can see, if you do project it onto the room and you've got a room that's big enough, you can make it pretty huge. This is obviously quite a large sofa that I'm putting it next to, and it's taken up a large bit of the room there as well. It has some smart autofocus technology in it too, so you can move it around and then it will automatically refocus. You can also manually adjust the focus and tweak the corners. So if you find that it's off in some way, you can go into the projector settings and then you can go into image correction and you can move the corners around to adjust the screen and tilt and move it into a position where it's more suitable. But you can see again, this was taken in full daylight and it's still pretty clear on what's going on there. Now, it's certainly not going to replace a 1440p panel or a 4K display, but what it does do is potentially beat your TV, unless you've already got a gargantuan television, of course. You've seen that I've got a 65-inch TV in my room, but this thing theoretically is larger. However, in broad daylight, the picture won't be as clear, obviously, even if you do make it bigger. So you do need to account for those sorts of things and maybe get a smoother surface to cast onto. Unfortunately, I've got a relatively bright wall here to make the most of that, but it is nice to have that flexibility. So there's a lot of things going for this already. Obviously, you're seeing YouTube content now, so you've got access to plenty of different content that you can cast on there. Up to 2.5 hours means that you could watch films on it potentially really easily, and then you can also game on it. Now, gaming on it, you don't get the fast refresh rate, and it still has that max resolution of 1080p, which means it's not going to compare to the fancier monitors out there. But for the price, obviously this does more than your average monitor would do anyway. It's portable, has access to more content, and can do a lot more things potentially as well, with its own built-in speakers, which would put most monitor speakers to shame in my experience. And that's certainly something to write home about. My experience with gaming has been pretty good too. Obviously, you're seeing footage of a video here, but you've seen some gameplay footage as well. We've tried a lot of different games in a few different rooms and found that it delivers a good enough quality. You can also generally use Windows on it too, as you can see here, and get a nice big display for that too. So there's plenty of other productivity uses, for example, and more things that you can do. Now, the portability of it is also one that's really nice. You can see just how much you can move it around, taking it off the tripod, and then it'll freak out that it needs to automatically adjust depending on the location. But this does mean that you could potentially not use a tripod and maybe put it on a fireplace or on a shelf or on a cabinet of some sort, as long as it has a relatively straight angle to point at a nearby wall that will then give you a display. You can also shrink that display down so you can see if you can project it close, you'll then have a pretty clear display as well showing in that area. So that's another feature of it, which is pretty nice. And obviously the smaller you make it, the clearer it is. You're unlikely to be projecting at that size, but I did think that was an interesting experience with it. Now I want to talk about the negative aspects that I've found. One of which is it's tripod mountable, but the design of the bottom of it is a bit odd, because what I found with mounting it on my tripod, for example, is that the attachment that sits into the bottom where the standard tripod screw goes into, there's a bit of a round edge to the bottom of it, which means that even with the tripod all the way screwed in, it's still moving around on the tripod, as you could see. It's just not a solid setup there, and this leads to some issues because you really want it to be sitting stationary so it's not constantly adjusting the picture on the wall, so it just wouldn't screw in properly. So even if you tighten it all the way, you can see that that's still loose. Now that's not a problem on cameras and other things, so it's not like there's an issue with the tripod, but there is some solutions here. I used a bunch of elastic bands underneath there and then screwed it in. Now there may well be things that you can buy from Nebula which you could then use with this, and maybe that'll be the official sort of stand will work better. I can see there's a desk stand, for example, that you can attach it to, and that has a bit of a smaller tripod attachment. So you might not have this problem. It's going to depend on your tripod setup. But with the attachment that I use for my tripod, it's a bit wobbly without using something underneath to secure it. So that's one thing to bear in mind, and a small issue that I did discover along the way. The other downside for me is probably going to be the price, because it's about £550 or $600, which is pretty expensive when you think about the TVs that you could get as an alternative. However, if space is limited and you want to be able to project onto a large wall, then this is a great option. I was impressed by how it could handle daylight and how well it can be used for a variety of different things. And if you've got a really dark space, you can then really use it for watching a great amount of content. And just to give you a good sort of demo of the size of the thing as well, you can see this is not maximum size, but here I am standing next to it just to show you just how huge you can get it. So up to 150 inches potentially, and a pretty good display for watching loads of things on. Click on the links in the description to find out more and to see the specs. Thanks for watching. You've made it right to the end of the video, you brilliant legend you. If you've enjoyed it, click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below if you've got any questions. If you really enjoyed it, consider joining the channel and see the benefits of doing so. Check out these other videos, you might well find them interesting or useful, and most importantly, have a great life.